Hello, everyone. I'm so happy that you're here. And I just want to warmly welcome Bill Rettig, who I have known for years. And this is the first time that he is hosting this webinar for Queller Prep. From the kindness of his heart, with a wealth of knowledge, he is about to give us an incredible presentation, an hour of power, where we will get so much knowledge about college. Bill is going to share college advice cumulatively over 20 years as a University of Michigan recruiter. And we are beyond honored to have you here and to share and impart your wisdom. And you should know that a similar webinar was run for the students at Townsend Harris High School. We are beyond fortunate that you are really just sharing your personal wisdom, your personal knowledge, your years of experience. I can just go on and on saying thank you. So Bill, before we even start the webinar, sincerely saying thank you so much for hosting this. We are so fortunate to have you here right now. Without any further ado, Bill, please take over from this point. Thank you, Bill.
Thank you, Francis. Good evening, parents and students. I hope this is going to be a useful, informative presentation. So a little bit about myself briefly. So I was a recruiter for the University of Michigan for 20 years. So that meant going to high schools, fairs, making presentations, meeting with students at various high schools, and coordinating with the admissions committee at University of Michigan. But over the years, I have had the pleasure of having many conversations with admissions officers and professionally giving college advice to many families and reading extensively. This has all informed me, and I want to share a lot of the insights that I have. This is more than just something you'd find in a book or on the website. This is kind of like, some of it is just sort of like my take on insights that go on behind the curtain, so to speak, in the admissions office. A couple of words about my career. So I've worked as a management consultant. My training is actually in statistics. So I have that kind of, that framework that I look at things from sort of a analytic point of view. And that helps me kind of like shape things. As far as the presentation goes, I was the PTA co-president at Townsend Harris High School. My son just graduated. So there was 4 years. I was PTA president for 2 years. And I gave a lot of presentations. That's actually why I got involved with the PTA board, because I was giving presentations before I joined the board. I thought that I had this knowledge and insights I wanted to share with the Townsend Harris community. And that's where the impetus came to giving these presentations. So as I go on, I'm going to turn the page in a moment. I really welcome questions. So please put your questions in the chat. I'm not going to wait just to the end to do it, because sometimes I might overlook something or I don't do something right. It helps to get the feedback, and the questions really help. So if you have a question, the chances are many people have the same question. So please feel free to add anything to the, doesn't have to be a question, just anything, and I will read it. Okay, so we have some questions already there. Good. All right, let me begin. Okay, so the original title for this, when I presented this, a version of this to the Townsend Harris community, was How to Get into a Good College. It's kind of catchy, simple, to the point, right? So what we're going to try to cover tonight is how to choose your college list, admission strategies from the perspective of an admissions officer or the admissions office. So the idea with that is I'm going to sprinkle a lot of kind of like ways that the admissions office sees the student from their perspective. I'm going to go through the Common App a little bit, kind of like introduce it. I'm going to plug small liberal arts colleges because it's one of my longstanding issues or complaints that it gets overlooked. So there's a really wonderful collection of small colleges out there that are overlooked, and we'll talk about that. We'll talk about the college essays. And lastly, but not least, of course, would be financial aid, because most of us need it, and it's very intimidating. And I'm going to kind of like introduce that and sort of make the process a little bit easier, less intimidating. Okay. Let me just get started here. Okay, so I would say the most underrated part of the whole process is the college list. So the danger for many families going through the process for the first time, especially, is you don't do your homework and you just throw in the common names, the most famous names in the Northeast, and you take your chances and see where you get in. That is not a strategy that I recommend. And I'll explain more about that. But let's just first look at the big picture. So there are 2,000 colleges in the country, right? And you ultimately, most experts say the list that you finally select should only be between 8 and 12, right? So you're gonna have to cut the list down dramatically. I mean, right away, geography plays a role. And you might want a large school, you might want a rural school. There are many factors involved. But the point is, this is a big deal. And I'm going to talk about now about how to select that list. Okay. All right. So it's daunting at first. 2,000 colleges. Where do you begin? So there are a lot of resources out there. The FISC guide is the one book. If you're going to invest, this is not available online. This is how you have to get a hard copy of this. You can order it from barnesandnoble.com or Amazon. This is the oldest and most wonderful book. It's about $25. It's called the FISC guide. I have it right here. Please buy that. It gives you 3 pages or so, 3 or 4 pages on every college. And it really is very like level-headed advice. And they talk about each college, what makes it distinct, what campus life is like, and they of course provide the statistics, but this is wonderful. YouTube videos are really amazing, because when I'm talking about the videos, I'm talking about the students. So the students have been so generous and so wonderful. So many of the videos are excellent, and they really give you the perspective of the student. So you can view a video of a student talking about a day in the life, or a dorm tour, or sitting in on a class, and you really get a flavor for the school. Because when you're choosing the colleges, what matters most is there a fit? I'm going to use that word a lot tonight. Is there a fit for the student? Does that student feel comfortable? Is this the right place? Is this the right place where 4 years you're going to thrive? You're going to really enjoy your 4 years there, your experience there, and then you're going to get the most out of it. And it's much more than just academics. It's really about your comfort level. There's no substitute for visiting the college campuses. That's where you're getting the vibe. And when you visit, if you have to take the tour, fine, but that's not what I recommend. I think the best way to do it is tour it yourself. Every admissions office will offer you a self-guided tour. And please be bold and walk up to students and introduce yourself, because 9 out of 10 will love to hear that you're a prospective student and they were in the same shoes a couple of years ago. So they'll be very, very delighted to share any information and things. You get a sense of the school. That's the most, I would say, if you ask me what's the single most important way of choosing a college, it's that right there. There's a lot of websites, and I'm going to actually share this document right now. So at the end, Francis is going to share some of these documents. We're going to coordinate on how to distribute these. But this is a document that I wrote that kind of like gives a summary of the main sources of information for college search, financial aid, that I have found the most success with. So there's a lot of valuable information out there, right there. Okay. Okay, so one of the first ways of kind of filtering the colleges is through these web-based. Most of the websites I listed there have a filtering system. So you could choose your major, your campus, your test scores, et cetera, and it will select schools based on that. It's not the greatest thing, but it's very rigid. So, they're not going to get a campus vibe. They're not talking about who you are, as a person. But this is like a first cut. The screenshot I have here is from the College Board. The same people who published the SAT have a very, very excellent filtering tool. Okay. Let me just see something here for the chat. All right, there's so many questions. Yeah. Okay. Yeah, so people are agreeing with about the FIS guide. Good. Okay, let me move on here. Okay, so we're talking about other tools available. So this presentation wouldn't be complete without at least briefly mentioning about the US News rankings. So I'm sure many people are familiar with it. It is without question the most widely followed list, and the admissions officers, as much as they may kind of criticize it, it is highly regarded, privately at least, and they're constantly jockeying for position on it. So it is something that you should definitely consider, but I wouldn't take it with a grain of salt. It is, roughly speaking, kind of a measure of selectivity. They use a lot of factors in it, which gives a lot of prestige. It's not just one thing. They factor in things like alumni giving, student faculty ratio, outcomes, your job prospects when you graduate, how much what your incomes are like 10 years later. Diversity is factored in, like Pell Grants and things like that, percent of students that have Pell Grants, and et cetera. So it is a very reliable list. It doesn't change much year to year. Let me show you what I did, actually. I hope that we will share this stuff. But what I did was actually, rather than go to the list that you see like 5 at a time, I actually compiled this list.
Bill, can you make it larger just so that everyone can see it more easily?
Absolutely. Yes, thank you, Francis. So I just kind of, as convenience, I just highlighted in green the ones that are in the Northeast, because most students are going to want to go nearby. But, and the publics are in gray. So you can see the parallel list. I'm going to talk about the liberal arts colleges soon. But the US News famously has 2 parallel lists to the universities and the liberal arts colleges. And I'll talk about the differences, but for now, the liberal arts colleges are smaller. So they're only 2,000 students or so, give or take. And they don't have graduate schools. And they tend to be very beautiful campuses, I might say so. And then you have the universities are more famous, right? So the brand names are usually on this list, right? You just scroll down here so you can see. But you know most of these names. So again, the ranking is just a crude, excuse me, the rankings are just a crude measure of like selectivity. So that's another way of looking at it. You kind of want where you roughly feel, as a very crude guide, where you fit in. That doesn't mean you can't get into any of the top schools or anything like that. It is meant as just a rough guide, okay? But it is a guide. So I just want to kind of mention that, okay? Okay, so continuing with the search. So I emphasize the search because when you're choosing 10 colleges and you do it the right way, this is why it's so important. I'm going to share something that I feel very firmly, that if you do your homework and you choose the right 8 or 10 colleges and you keep it to that number and you really focus on fit, the chances are you're going to get your child is going to get into many of those schools because it's the fit you've chosen. In other words, you're not taking a school because, my uncle went there, or because it's the most prestigious school I can get into. That is something that I personally discourage families from taking that position. You really have to do your homework. Look, your college will have a big impact on your life. It's 4 years. There's a lot of money involved. And it's 4 years where a child's future, their perspective is shaped, not just by what goes on in the classroom, but by the students that you're going to be sharing classrooms and everyday life with, right? So you really want to make this decision with a lot of care. So continuing what I was saying before about the vibe of the campus, obviously visiting the school, like I said, is the most important thing. But there's the websites themselves are more than just information. The websites really go out of their way to try to convey the personality of the school, because it is in their interest to identify who they are, because they want to attract students that fit. That's what admissions officers look for. Yes, they look for grades. You have to have sort of like a cutoff kind of thing with grades and stuff. But excuse me, colleges really want to see the personality of the student, who you are, what will you bring to the campus, and how do you fit from a cultural standpoint? Okay, so it's a two-way street. They're looking for the best fit, and the student is looking for the best college that fits them. Okay, so bear that in mind, because everything that I say is in that context. Okay. Just look at this here. Okay. Let me go on. Okay, so a word about small liberal arts colleges. Now, one of my pet peeves is when I looked at, for example, Townsend Harris, I think they were only sending about like 8% or something, some really low number going to a liberal arts college. And that kind of was, in a way, heartbreaking. I will share this with you. In the private schools, like in the city, like the Collegiates, the Trinity, Horace Mann, those private schools, they're sending 50% to liberal arts schools. So there's a reason they're often like really in the know. I mean, there's a lot more, they're spending a lot more money on the high school, so they're paying a lot more attention to it. I just share that with you because it's kind of a suggestion that people who really pay attention to these things know about these colleges. So why would you consider them? Well, first of all, they're better values in terms of what you're getting in, because they're not getting as much attention. It's like buying an off-brand label that's just as good, but they're not paying for the advertising. So they're really high quality schools. They have smaller class sizes. The student faculty ratio is only 7-1 typically, as opposed to 11 to 15 to 1. I'll tell you one quick anecdote. I was visiting a college with my son, and it was made clear by one of the school administrators that if a student misses 2 or 3 days in a row, the professor actually like tries to track you down, like, are you okay? So, that kind of gives you a sense of like the family there, right? You're not going to get that at a big school. You're not going to get that at Cornell. You're not going to get that at University of Rochester or Case Western or any of those big schools, right? There's no graduate school, so the professors are more hired and promoted based on the quality of their teaching. And financial aid is actually excellent at the top schools. They're really, really good. So, okay, so I break the colleges down into 3 types. So this is one of the considerations that you're going to think about when you're choosing this very important college list. So they can be divided into 3 categories. You have the private liberal arts schools, which have about 2,000 students. I have it down on the bottom here. The private research universities, right? So that's the Ivy League schools. We all know about those: Johns Hopkins, University of Washington in St. Louis, University of Rochester, Case Western Reserve. I'm just, mentioning some names off the top of my head. So those have larger class sizes. They're between 4,000 and 8,000 students. In both cases, you're going to be living on campus for these 2 categories, usually 3 years, sometimes 4 years. You certainly have the option to do it 4 years. Most students will live at least 3. Some schools require all 4, and especially in the liberal arts schools. So liberal arts schools will generally require that you live on campus all 4 years. And that's a stark contrast with the public universities. Now, the public universities have their own, they're all pros and cons to it. The public universities have a much bigger student faculty ratio. It's usually about 15-1 or so. You only live on campus 1 year. That's a big difference, right? So after that year, you're going to be living with friends you're renting a house or an apartment, typically a house that you share with like maybe 15 other students that you met in your first year. So there's public, when you think of the public, you think of the in-state and the out-of-state, right? So of course we have the state university system, led by particularly the big three, I would call it, Binghamton, Stony Brook, and Buffalo. Those are the best of the state universities. There are also smaller ones, but they're less selective. Those three are the most selective. And, they have a lot of advantages, right? They're close by. You probably have a lot of students from your child's high school going to them. There's a certain comfort level with it because nearly all the students are from New York. And they're usually very friendly places. All public universities tend to be kind of, because it's naturally diverse, because socioeconomically, the state is obligated, it's funded by the state. So they really go out of their way to take students from all walks of life within the state. And many people think it's cheaper. And that's something I'm going to talk about later in the slideshow. In many cases, for most families, it's not necessarily less expensive. That kind of surprises a lot of people. We're going to talk about that a lot in the financial aid part. And then there's the out of state. So if you're going to a public school, a public university, you like that because they have economies of scale. So there's going to be a lot more clubs. There's going to be a lot more theater. There's going to be a lot more activities, more classes, more majors. There's a lot more to do there, and they have that diversity. It's kind of like guaranteed to not be like arrogant or pretentious, which appeals to me. It appeals to a lot of parents and students, right? So it's not going to have that. That's a plus. So you consider out-of-state schools. Now, every state in the country accepts out-of-state students. The percentages vary, and some are more prestigious than others. The one here is kind of like the most selective, and I compare it to Binghamton. So Binghamton's only 8% out-of-state. The ranking here is approximate because it changes every year, but I just put it down there. So that's from the US News ranking. And you can see Michigan takes 40% out of state. Virginia is a high percentage. Some of them are really changing. Maryland, I think this is actually hard. It's moved up. This is a little bit dated. Okay. They also break down the schools. So these larger schools know they're larger. And to accommodate and to compete against the smaller schools, they have smaller communities, living, learning, residential colleges, living, learning communities. They have an honors programs. So it's like a school within a school. They'll have a dorm dedicated just to one program. A living, learning community might have only 50 students living in one building. And they'll typically be offered classes that only the students in that program can take. So it makes it smaller. But of course, they take most of their classes in the university. But you have that duality. You have the advantage of a large school on the one hand, and then you have the community on the other hand that's smaller. So that's something to think about. Again, you have to visit the schools. Parents who have not gone through this process before, there's absolutely you can read about it or hear it, but you have to see the schools and visit the websites and all those things to really make the right decision. Okay, again, I want to emphasize that I don't think it's wise to do more than 12 colleges. If you have more than 12, you probably haven't put as much effort into thinking about fit and where's the best fit. The other thing about the lists is, besides the number, is the range of schools. So you should have a sense of what a reach school is and a target school. I'm going to talk more about that in the next couple of slides. But let me give you an example. So you should have one, maybe two reach schools, 5 to 8 schools that are schools that you're sort of like a 50% chance to get into, kind of like you feel you can get in based on what you've read. There's a website which I recommend called College Confidential. They have a great forum, and they have a section called Chance Me. So a lot of these students will estimate your chances. It's a little bit obnoxious, but they do it. If you're not sure, or you could speak to your high school advisor, your counselor, guidance counselor. I'm just actually share this with you. This is actually a document from a student. And I share this with you because this is like a way of, there's gonna be so many deadlines. You're gonna be inundated. If you don't organize it at first, you're gonna be like getting very anxious. So you wanna make sure the supplemental essays are sent in, when the interview is, if it's offered, when you send the SAT, if you choose to do that. The letters of recommendation are all over the map. Some will require one, some require two. Many take optional one or two. So you got to go into the website. You got to go to the on the Common App or the web, or spend the time on the website and understand how it works. And if you're doing financial aid, you want to put the dates that you do it, right? You don't want to miss a date. And this is an example of a list. This is 9 colleges here. So this is just a sample of how you do a list. It's like a range of like one reach school. I think for this person, Williams was the reach school. Excuse me, Williams was the reach school. And then you have, and the you see the typical range. So that's fairly a good idea. So you should use one safety school. You don't need more than that. Okay, so that was the admissions timeline. I'm going to share this with you. Okay, so this is just handy. I think we'll coordinate sending this out, but just kind of like knowing. I think many of you already know this, but just to keep, you don't want to lose the deadlines and see. You want to see ahead, okay? So you want to look ahead and know what to expect, because a lot of this stuff can't be done at the last minute. Particularly the essays, the personal statement, which we'll talk about more, takes time. It usually takes several weeks, and sometimes you spend a lot of time on it. It's a very difficult thing to do, and then you don't like it and you have to start all over again. So if you want the best chance, you have to do these things early. One thing I'm going to definitely share with you about the timeline is, even though January is the deadline for regular decision, the early action deadline is November, right? The first half of November. So you want to have your list set by then, and you have to have the personal statement done, because that has to go in with the application. So even though the supplementary essays are not due until you apply in January, if you're applying regular decision, basically your list should be done by no later than October. And just to emphasize that point, I do know that many private high schools and some public schools actually require that students have their college list and the college list and their common application with the essay completely finished by the end of October. Like typically it will say like the 3rd or 4th week of October. It must be done. That's a requirement. And if they don't, then these private schools will prioritize that for the student and the parent. So that just shows you how important it is to get it done early. So please don't delay that, because there's too many moving parts. There are too many moving parts to do that. And you also have to deal with the financial aid. So you have to also deal with that in parallel. So financial aid, by the way, is due the same day. Typically, there are some exceptions, but by and large, it's due the same day as the applications do. Okay, so keep that in mind as well. Okay, so there are some questions. Francis, are there any questions that you saw that would be interesting?
No, I think we're good, and I'm answering what I can on my end. So we are going pretty strong. And thank you, Bill. Can you make it a little bit larger just so that
this one? Yeah, because this won't fit. I'll make it larger, but
no, it's okay.
Yeah, no, this won't fit. Yeah,
and
so it
you
scrolls off
it after, but I think just for now, I just want to can you just read some of it out loud? I just want everyone to
hear. Absolutely.
I really appreciate that you're such a mathy person. I'm not, so I actually really like what I'm looking at. So if you could just read it out so that we see how you're organizing the timeline.
Okay, so so the admissions is self-explanatory. Just a word about that, because we have a mixed audience, right? So a lot of people are more familiar with this process than others, especially if it's your first child. That's where it gets really intimidating. So if you're going through this the first time, should I talk about the testing? So the testing. So there's a lot of parents have questions about testing. So a kind of an insight about that. So testing now, because of COVID, every school is test optional. Wasn't always that way. Before COVID, most schools were test required to submission of SATs. Many of the liberal arts schools, by the way, have been test optional for years, including some of the most prestigious ones, like Bowdoin has been test optional for like 10 years. But the Ivies and the prestigious schools, the most prestigious schools, the name brand schools, so they went test optional. So what does that mean? I'll tell you something in practice. If you don't send the score And unless you did, if you did even decently, I would send the score, because even though they say it won't count against you, I don't believe, I wouldn't believe it. So you really should send the school. And keep in mind something, the score means much less than people realize. I'll say that. Okay, it means much less than people realize. I think there's a good quote about that the SAT means less than what students think, but more than what college admissions officers admit to, and that kind of captures it. Now, in the COVID era, because they cut out the subject test completely, and the grades, no question about it, the grades have been inflated. That's you can't dispute that, the transcript grades, and so you can make a case that the SAT will have a greater weight. However, I say that the SAT is very limited in how it's valued. It's more of as a cutoff, right? Are you this from the perspective of an admissions officer? They want to see if that student is academically qualified. Excuse me, because one thing that they don't want to have happen is a student gets into school and they're struggling academically. So that's where the SAT comes in. The SAT, they think of it as sort of like, it's always in conjunction with the grades. They actually come up with one single score. Most schools will actually convert your grades and scores into a number from 1 to 5. And they have like 4 categories, like extracurricular activities, letters of recommendation, and miscellaneous category, and your scores and grades, and any special talents, for example. And the grade 1 to 5, they have actually software that they use that they'll emphasize. For example, if you improved over your 3 years up to your junior year, they'll look at only unweighted for most schools, unweighted grades, and they'll look at the core subjects more than the non-core subjects. Like, for example, an AP calculus counts more than AP statistics, right? As an example, or AP bio more than AP psych. So they have this algorithm. They have a number between 1 and 5, and 2 is basically you're going to make an offer. 3, no, but they have plus and minuses. So if you're 2 minus or 3 plus, then you go to what's called committee, and that's something I'll talk about a bit. Anyway, I'm kind of let me go on here. This is actually going well. Okay, so Naviance is another valuable tool, extremely valuable. It's password protected. Every high school, I would say like 80% of the high school, 70% are subscribed to it. They pay a fee. So every high school pays a fee. The parents don't pay the fee. The high school pays the fee. So the city of New York, the DOE paid a huge fee so that every high school, every public high school, is 430 high schools. Every high school is in Naviance in New York City, every one. So your child should have a password. It's extremely useful, and it's required. So you must, all the communication, like your college list, like you say you have a college list, how does it work? Well, it's all through Naviance. So Naviance has a back end to your high school guidance office. So they see what you put in Naviance. So you communicate through Naviance. So you enter your college list through Naviance, and then they see that, and those are the schools that they'll send like the letters of recommendation to, and the guidance office must send a letter to every school, requires a letter from the guidance office. They'll send that. Your transcripts are sent electronically through the Naviance back end connection to the high school guidance office. Okay, so it's really important. So you're definitely going to be using it. Your child will be using it for sure. It's required. But it's also has a lot of sort of tools on it. But the most useful tool that most people use, like they get obsessed with it, really, is the scattergrams. So the scattergrams really it can be overused, but it does give you a pretty good flavor of what's been happening in the past. So it goes back 10 years. And it shows you on the bottom is the SAT scores, and the left is your GPA. And kind of gives you an idea where students are, et cetera, right? I got this picture from the web, actually. I took a screenshot. I actually was using it a lot, but because my son aged out, so we don't have access to it anymore. So you have password protection. But if you're in the school, whatever high school, you only see the scattergrams for the results of that school. So this I don't know what school this is for. This is as I said, I got this from the web. But if you went to whatever high school, you'd see that. That's what you'd see for your school. So it's very useful. So again, fit and preference, what are you choosing? This is kind of a list of these are some of the thoughts you have in your head. Like, what are the considerations for picking the school? Again, I really want to emphasize that you shouldn't just pick the local schools because they're famous or they're nearby. College is a wonderful opportunity to bridge between the independence of your child when they're in their early 20s and they have a job and they have to get their own apartment, and their situation now. So it's a great transition. I mean, more than learning and building skills for life, you're also learning to live on your own. So you really want to pick a school where you're going to be comfortable. And I'm a big believer in, going something a little bit out of town, because, this is an opportunity to, for a child to spread their wings and express their independence. So kind of know this just in case you don't. It's EDEA versus RD, regular decision. So there's many colleges, especially the liberal arts colleges, have 2 rounds of early decision. Okay. November actually the first half of November, because it varies. It's going to be the first half of November, the first half of January. Okay. You find out in 4 to 6 weeks. That's the nice thing about early decision. Now, early decision is binding. That's why if you make the decision, it's very, very important that this is the school that you want to go to. Now, there are advantages to it, so it's a trade-off, right? So it's binding, so you'll never know what other schools you get into, and it's a commitment. But the flip side is, for many schools, not all, it does afford you an advantage. Why does it afford you advantage? From the point of view of the admissions office, they know you're expressing demonstrated interest to the maximum, right? They know that you want to go there. So, and it's also good for them because they don't have to worry about the yield. So the yield is something that they sweat about. So admissions officers sweat about yield. Yield is students who are accepted, how many of them enroll. So obviously it's a percentage. It varies from, like, the top Ivies have like 70, 80% of the accepted students enroll, and other schools are typically, like, maybe for Binghamton is really low, because they have to, they can't play the yield game. A lot of these schools will only take you if they think you'll accept their offer. They tend to do that. So, but Binghamton takes that. So Binghamton's only 15%, but the typical school will be like 30, 40% yield kind of. Early action, very few schools offer that. That is the domain of the public universities. Correct me, I actually meant to say private schools seldom offer that. This is exclusively, not exclusively, but all the publics use it. All the publics use early action. No public school in the country offers early decision. So every public university, whether it's University of Michigan, University of North Carolina, the SUNYs, the CUNY, none of them offer early decision. They all offer early action. If you apply early, you have an advantage, usually. Not always, but usually. Some of the private schools, not many, offer early action too. In fact, some offer early action and early decision. Any questions about that? Okay, Francis is doing a good job running interference. So I would like a question. Francis, you can give me a question right now.
So I'll take a look at the chat right now, but I'm going through it, so it's running.
Oh yeah, so there's a question here. I just saw a question here. Okay,
go right ahead.
Okay, so one Marco asked, if you apply ED, what happens if financially you're unable to attend? Okay, so we're going to talk about that a little bit in the net price calculator. So you can get a pretty good idea of what they're going to offer you through this tool called the net price calculator. But that's the only way that you can actually break the ED. So the ED is a signed document. You sign it, your parents sign it, and the school guidance counselor signs it. So it is a legally binding document, and it says there, the only way you can break it is financial aid is not enough. You can't afford it, but that's seldom going to happen. And if you do break it, actually, it could really hurt the school's reputation, and it's not a good thing. So don't even think along those lines. And the offer will be generous because you can tell what it is from the enterprise calculator. So you really have information going in. I'm going to talk more about financial aid too. We're going to talk about the enterprise calculator. That's a big deal, a very big deal. So I'm going to talk about that. That's right. Okay. So yeah, a parent asks, is it worth submitting a 3 for AP scores? My answer to that is, it depends on the context, the schools you're applying to, but generally speaking, I like the idea of for lack of a better word, transparency. So, have threes, you'll have fours, you might have fives. I would kind of tend to send them all in because you want to convey this attitude of being honest, because that's like a big deal. Because they don't know you. They just read the application. They want to get a sense that you're being fair and honest. So my tendency is to send it in, even if it's not great. Because you're a human being, and they know the students are students, right? They're people. They're not going to be perfect. They don't want perfect kids. So that was the questions. If any other questions, I'm reading the chat right now. Kind of gives me a break here.
If you don't have a question, I have a question. I just want to know.
Please.
So I just want like a visual. So here you are at the University of Michigan. How does it work? I want a visual. How exactly does this work? Do they give you like a pile of applications? Do they give you, are there like 10 bills and they say, okay, you get 10 apps, you get 10 apps. Let's meet back in 2 weeks. I want like a super visual. Like, how does this work? What are you seeing on your end?
Right, exactly. So that's a good question. So basically, typically like 10% are really going to get in. The best because they're so stellar. It's not going to really be a difficult decision. And then there's a certain percentage that are going to be denied because they don't make certain cutoffs. But many of the students, maybe half or a third, go into what's called committee. So you no matter what, your application can be read by two people, two admissions officers. One is dedicated to the region. And you can actually find that out from the website. So if you go to the college websites, they'll actually tell you, many of them, most of them, will actually tell you the names of the admissions officers and the regions they cover. You can even fire them off an email if you wanted to, ask a specific question to show interest. And that's part of their job. They're very receptive. So they read it twice, at least two people. Sometimes a third person who's like a dean or a director or an associate dean will read it for a third view if there's some issue, and they evaluate it. And then the decisions are made not then and there. They go to committee. So the committee is usually like a 3-day or 4-day period where they go like 14, 16 hours for 3 straight days. And they'll do it over like 2-3 weekends. So it happens in like late November for early decision. And then for the January, they'll have one in like late January and February and in March. And they sit around the table. There's usually the admissions officers. A typical school, a liberal arts school, will have like 8 to 10 admissions officers, and the universities will have more, but they break down into different groups. But usually be 10 people at a table, including a senior person. And it's a very important question, Francis, that you asked that, because to understand how to put in the best application is also to understand how it's evaluated. So what happens is usually one of the two admissions officers that read your application, typically the one in the region, will kind of champion you. There's something they liked about you. Maybe you wouldn't have the greatest grades, or something in your application was sort of not up to the standards. But there's something about them that you wrote in your essay. That's where the personal statement is so important. I mean, you're conveying your personality, and you want to be likable. If you like you and they really want to support you, they're going to make a pitch. And the pitch, it's usually 10 minutes. That's all it is. Each candidate gets 10 minutes roughly. And then they know all the jargon. So it goes pretty quickly. So they'll make the pitch, and then they'll go hands up, hands down, thumbs up, thumbs down. If they a strict majority vote, though most of the time it's going to be unanimous, but usually it's majority will rule. And that's what happens. It's the point I'm making here more than anything is it's subjective. There is such a big subjective component to admissions. That's why you see students will get into like Princeton and they won't get into like Tufts, or they won't get into Cornell. They won't get into Michigan or whatever. It's because there is a huge subjective component to it, right? So you want to leverage that by making yourself interesting, be honest, know who you are. It's very hard to ask a 17-year-old to really kind of lay it out there, but that's part of it. That's really part of it. That's a good question. Okay. Okay, view from the admissions office. So one word about what they're really looking for. So athletes, artists, activists, academics. they're trying to build a community, really. So they don't want everyone who's just sort of like a really super smart person. They're not going to want that. They want students that are going to make the college community more interesting. They're going to bring different viewpoints. That's why there's geographic diversity, there's socioeconomic diversity, there's ethnic diversity. There's so many diversities because that adds dimensions, character, layers to the school, right? Nuance. They want students to be exposed to all kinds of different ways of life. Rural, if you come from a rural family, you probably have an advantage because there are fewer rural students from rural areas than there are from cities, right? So that's something to think about when you're filling out the application, because you don't realize it because your child, you're not really objective, but your child is very unique. And it's sort of a burden to try to like dig into that uniqueness, but it's worth it because that uniqueness is going to play a big role in the admissions process. And I use the word holistic comes up constantly. If you heard any of these admissions office videos, they use that word over and over again. And there's a reason, because it's really true. So the idea of holistic view is they look at everything. It's not just your scores. It's not just your extracurriculars. It's not just your awards, your achievements, or the sports you play. It's everything. They look at you as a person, and the missing pieces that would be like the supplemental essay and the personal statement that helps them fill it out. There might be an interview that's going to help a little bit, but they're looking at all those dimensions, right? So the Common App is where it all is. I mean, pretty much every school. There are a couple of exceptions, like University of Wisconsin, to name one, but there are very few schools now that are not on the Common App. I think Georgetown's not on it, to name two, but pretty much every other school is on it. I think the number is like 900 schools now are on the Common App. So it makes life much easier than the old days. We had to, every college had a different application. So the idea is that most colleges want the same thing. So you fill it out once, all the key information, the demographic information, your parents, what your job, your parents' occupations are, things about yourself and your awards. So there's 5 awards or honors that you put down, 10 activities, and that's a whole conversation about how you should arrange that. We don't have time tonight for that, but something definitely to explore. And the personal statement. So the personal statement is 650 words maximum, and I'll talk about that a little more later, but that's common to every school. So every school is get your personal statement. The supplement essays vary by school. Some don't have any. Some have 1, some have 2, some have 3. So that really varies. One of them, if they do have one, most schools do have it. One of them will always be something of the form like, why do you choose us? So again, you have to leverage things that make your child diverse. So, there's something in there that's going to help. You really want to emphasize that. I think the best analogy I heard about that was, a circle is like, you have skills in everything. You're a well-rounded kid. You do whatever it is. You have some extracurricular activities. You're in a club. You're good in school, but you want to have that circle with a spike. And I love that analogy because that really captures the essence of like what makes you special, because there's a lot of students that have that circle, right? A lot of smart kids that are playing, especially when you go up that ladder, right? With the competitive ladder, there's a lot more intense competition. So that spike is going to play a bigger role. And that's what the admissions officers love to see, the spike. What makes you different? What's special about you? Okay. And that's what I was saying. This is a great quote. That's why I have it here. Good colleges are not looking for the well-rounded student. They're looking for the well-rounded class. So that's the spike. Kind of what I was talking about before about that spike there. I mentioned a lot of this before, actually. So just kind of like captures it. The fit, I mentioned that as a big deal. It's a two-way street. It's partly the burden on the student to look into where's the fit. If there's a really good fit, you're going to get in. I think that really makes a difference. If you find the fit, that really makes a big difference, right? And then again, the perspective of the admissions officer. So think about what they're looking for and how they want to, what they want to see. It's kind of a little bit of a game, which I'm not crazy about, but that's really what will give you an advantage. So that's more of a conversation about how that works. I mentioned a few things about it. Okay, so the personal essay. This is the one place that you have the most flexibility, because your grades and your SAT and your extracurriculars, your clubs, that's all kind of set at this point. The personal essay, you should start writing it. If you're a junior, it should be right now. The summer is the time, August. Don't wait past August to start writing it. School's going to be starting up your senior year and you're going to be distracted. You want to have this, a good head start on it. It's the voice of the student. It's an opportunity to define yourself. And it's the biggest part of it is it's not obvious. You never want to brag about yourself here. You never want to really repeat something that's in your application. Is this something just about you? I mean, some of the best essays were about like a student like walking their dog and looking at the sky, and they got interested in astronomy that way. It could be a relationship you have with your uncle. It could be like a hiking experience and something that happened to you that shaped you. It could be some kind of like relationship. So it's more of an informal, and you want to think of it as something that's going to make you likable and make you different. Like, it's very hard to do. You think about it, how many people like, you're kind of exposing who you are to strangers. So it is a very tricky thing to do. And that's why I think you should really do put a lot of time into it. I created this document on strategies to basically, this is such an important document. So you really want to like think about the things I've written down here. It engages the reader, charms, has an arc, tells a story, has focus, right? Uplifts. It's usually uplifting. You can have some kind of thing in there, but ultimately it should be uplifting at the end of the day. The topic is very open. They do have 6 prompts. Seven prompts. 6 are specific, like give a time when you overcame a challenge and how it's affected your life, or describe a person in your life that's influenced you, that kind of thing. And then I have like lists of things that you should really try to avoid. You should not be boastful. Really be careful about that. You don't want us to be boring, because they have to read a lot of these. I mean, they read 30 when it's the admission season. They have to read 30 of these things every day. And I've heard admissions officers say time and time again that when they drive home from work, they want to remember 2 or 3 that stood out, right? So think about that when you write this thing. So you want what if it could be something special, something that'll be memorable, that's going to really make a difference, right? Again, it's subjective. So this is the time where the subjectivity really plays a big role. Okay. So let me just take any questions. We're up to an hour.
Bill, can I ask another question, just because I want to go straight for the jugular with the questions? When you personally, Bill Retzig, are looking at a college application, where do you look at the most heavily? I want to go like straight for that target. So once again, so that everyone hears this, when you are looking at making a decision, is someone going to get into Michigan? This is you. What are you looking at the most? And is that also what you look at first and foremost? And before you respond, everyone, I just want to remind you, I typed in the chat if you guys can leave a review. I love the reviews. Okay, so please take a moment to Google or Yelp the reviews. We like it. And please, it's really a nice opportunity to thank Bill, because it's also a great way to publicly thank him, to have it posted online that he's awesome for doing this. With that being said, back to my question. When you yourself are doing this, what is the first thing you're looking at, and what is the most important thing you look at when you look at the student's application for serious consideration as an applicant to the college?
Right. So I hate to disappoint. There is not one answer to that, because that word comes back again, the holistic. They're really looking at the rounded student. They're looking for fit. So I've heard it said that they want to visualize that student like walking down the hall in one of the classroom buildings, right? So do you fit on the campus? Is this going to be a place where you'll thrive? Now, ideally, the student will have done that work and figured it out that this is a place. And 9 times out of 10, if that's the case, you're probably going to get accepted. But they really look at everything, and it's not just a number. It's really looking at that person from the first. We have to be qualified. Like I said, you have to be qualified. They do have some numbers, like they have this algorithm and software that do churn out some numbers just so they can kind of like balance it. But, it is a subjective decision. Have you done, I would look at, say, for example, are they well-rounded, but they have that spike? In other words, have they done something out of the classroom, whether it's a club? Did they start a club? Leadership is very important. Do they show leadership? I much rather them focus on one or two activities, like they maybe the musician and they've traveled and they've been in a band and they started a club in music. I'd rather see that than like 6 different smaller activities that don't have a theme. So that's something that I look for. Do you have something that makes you distinct? Like I was saying before about the well-rounded person versus well-rounded class. So they want to have some, like, are you different? Are you special? Are you a leader? Will you add to the campus? And do you fit in? I mean, there's a lot of that subjective. It really is. It's a very subjective process. Sorry, I can't do better than that. Do you have any question about that? I mean, that's where it's tricky. And that's why they have these probabilities of getting in, this likelihood of getting in, chance me kind of thing. Because the truth is, nothing's a certainty. It's very, very hard for a parent and a child. When you go through the process, it is nerve-wracking because you really don't know where you're going to get in. And you're going to sweat. It's going to be very, very anxiety producing, but that's something that you have to just deal with. That's the nature of the beast. There is a randomness to it. I hate to say. Let me just do this financial aid. So I'm going to start off with financial aid. I have a cheat sheet. So there's a lot of information about financial aid here. This table here, this sheet goes on here. It's 1 page, actually. I'm going to talk about a lot of this stuff below in the next few slides, but this kind of captures like the aid, where you're going to get the aid from. So if you're Suny and CUNY, it's going to be a little bit different. Well, the idea of the Suny and CUNY is that the state feels, or they've already given you like a $35,000 grant right after that, because the tuition is like 11,000, as opposed to for a comparable school like 40,000 or 45,000. So they feel like they've already given you a $35,000 grant. So they're not really that generous beyond that. But there is the TAB program and the Excelsior scholarships, which add, like, take off another 5 and plus the Pell Grants. So if you qualify for that. So you have federal programs, which are actually not great because it's very hard to qualify for a Pell Grant, and it's income-based, but the income cutoff is pretty low. And they have stuff, almost everyone takes a subsidized loan. Go ahead. Question?
Can you make it larger, please? Just
yes.
So everyone.
Mm-hmm. Let me make this larger. So in the federal programs are not great, actually. So most students will take advantage of the Stafford loans, but it's limited. A freshman can only take out $3,500 and a junior $5,500, and it's subsidized. So you don't pay interest. The government will pay the interest while you're in school, and then for the first year or semester after school, and then you pay it back at a subsidized rate. I think it's 8%, but it's only so much money. And then you have the need-based. So the main action is the first row in the private grants, and the last section, need-based grants. We'll talk about that, but that's where most of the money for financial aid comes from. I'm going to talk about that because that's related to the net price. So let me go back, because a lot of these things I'm going to touch on here. So, it's very daunting. So you're sending your child to a school, and you look at the sticker price and you say, I can't afford that. $75,000 is the average price for a selective college. It's $30,000 at SUNY when you factor everything in, right? The books, the fees, the transportation, room, board, et cetera. And that's talking if you live on the campus, right? However, most families can't afford it, and they have to get financial aid. It's over 60% actually get financial aid. It's 60% it's 50 to 60% at the elite colleges, but in general, it's 70% or even higher at public colleges. Okay, but the average need-based grant is $40,000. So I'm going to talk about financial aid quickly here because it is such a big deal. So one of the biggest things is the generosity of the aid is actually related to the selectivity of the college, and that is reality. The more selective colleges have the most generous financial aid. So at a top 25 college, whatever your need is, and that's something I'm going to talk about, how they determine need, how they determine how much financial need you have. at the top 25 colleges, they give you all of it as a grant, and that's it. In fact, the Ivy League, for example, has a rule against loans. They do not permit them. They do not have them. So if your need is $50,000, so the course is about 80. At an Ivy League school, I think it's about $80,000, the all-in sticker price. And say that based on the FAFSA and the CSS profile, those forms, they figure you can pay, say, $15,000 a year. So that's a pretty fair number, I think, when they come up with that. That means there's a gap of 65,000. So they're going to give you that whole thing, or nearly the whole thing, as a grant. The only thing they won't give you is they may carve out for that loan, that 3,500, and for work study, which is about 2,000. So they're going to give you 60,000. You don't pay it back. There's no loans. So when they graduate, you don't generally have any loans to pay back. Now I'm going to talk about the impact on admissions. I'm going to talk about the net price calculator, how merit aid is used, and SUNY versus private. Okay. So the big number, financial aid 101. So the big thing, these are three terms that come up a lot, and it really is important to know what they are. So the big one is the expected family contribution. So this basically, in a few words, is the reasonable amount that you pay based on your family finances. Okay, that's a big number, because basically everything you do, all the financial aid forms you fill out are only getting this number and nothing else. So the EFC is the main output of financial aid. So every school is like glomming to that number. So there's two calculations for it, okay? And they're usually very close. So the federal government has the FAFSA form. It's very short. That only takes usually a day, or like maybe 3-4 hours to fill it out. They don't focus on assets. And then you have the CSS profile. I'm going to get to those two in a second. The net price is a legally defined term. It's actually it's defined by the federal government, and you can't mess with it on the penalty of the government. Every college in the country is required by law to have a net price calculator on their website. I'm going to show you how to find it in a moment. So it's a legal definition. The school must give you an accurate. It takes about 10 minutes to fill this thing out. For every college, you can find out how much you're going to pay. And it's going to be amazing. You'll be shocked at how much different it's going to be. In other words, at one school, you might have to pay 10. At another school, you have to pay 30,000. Another school might be 50. It really varies enormously. So, and again, it's correlated to selectivity, but you should definitely check that out. And what it is, it's a sticker price minus the grants, usually the need-based grants, because they can't really determine the academic, the merit grants. So this is really effectively the sticker price minus the need-based grants that you don't pay back. So can't factor in loans, no work study. And grants, of course, are money you don't have to pay back. So the question then becomes, the sticker price, the total cost of attendance at 70, 75,000, depends on the school. And that's the basic breakdown. So tuition generally this is all private colleges, right? So I'm talking about the more selective private colleges, tuition doesn't vary that much, remarkably. You buy a Mercedes versus buying like a compact car, there's going to be a big difference in price, right? The world of colleges, it's not true. They're all the same. Harvard, of course, the same as Case Western, same as Rochester, as a lot of the schools are basically the same. So this kind of gives you a configuration here. So you have the net price and then the need-based grants, mostly need-based, okay? Pell grants are included there too. So that would be factored in as the grants. So that's a very straightforward definition. So when you get the net price, you're gonna have to come up with this money, either through a loan, work study, savings, et cetera, 529 plan, okay? But that's the net price. That's what you have to pay. So how do they determine how you can afford it? Well, I was talking about that. That's the expected family contribution is the big number, okay? So there are two ways. The numbers are usually pretty close, but they're not necessarily the same. The government form is required. Every college in the country requires it. And then you have the CSS profile. So the SUNYs don't require this. Many publics don't require it. Some do. Most of the private colleges will require this. And it's different for each college. So you apply to like 6 different private colleges. The forms will be slightly different. And the way they handle this differently because they have their own algorithm for dealing with how they value assets. Usually your home will be, you have like an exemption that they don't count it against you for your home. But they will ask you assets, especially what will count for determining your expected family contribution is if you have like a second house or business that you own a business, that could be a factor. Second house especially, or like investment property, I should say. So that would be used in a more impactful way. Okay. The CSS profile is longer, so that you should plan. That could take a couple of days, and usually you have some guidance on how to fill that out. So there are strategies to doing it. You have to be honest, but there are ways of reporting information that have multiple paths that if you know how it works, they could help you. There's a lot of money involved. Okay, so it comes down to this financial aid package. So you have expected family contribution. You can pay $20,000. Okay, so you have to pay, say, $55,000. How do they make you pay for it? Right. So I was saying before that there's like 25, 30 schools that just give you the grants and that's it. Right. The need-based grants. So you don't have to worry about it. But most schools can't afford it. They only have so much money. The money allocated is a set number before, the budget, the senior administration of the school sits down and they determine how much they have to give out. And it's usually pretty generous, but they can't give it out to everybody. So they have to use these other sources of money. Okay. So how do they make it affordable? Well, this is an example of the financial aid packages. Okay. So let me talk about that. So the most selective school here, is it coming out here? The bottom, I think I got cut off. On the bottom here, let me just jump to this. This is better. So I was saying before, the most selective schools, you can see the quality of the aid goes down. So the light blue is really what you want. The need-based grants are really the best. So as the selectivity drops, you can see the quality of the package goes down. Then they're going to give you a package, but you can see, when they say financial aid package, don't get excited because it's what's inside it. So you have to read the fine print. Any questions about that? So I want to talk about how it impacts admissions. Okay, so again, this is kind of an odd thing about colleges, which defies typical what you study in economics. Supply and demand does not hold for colleges. So all the top colleges have about the same cost of annual the cost of attendance. The sticker price is about the same for most of the top schools, like the top 50, 60, 70, 80 schools. They're all top 100 I put here. They're roughly the same price. And this slide is actually interesting because this is an illustrative slide about private colleges. Just kind of re-emphasizing what I said before, that this is kind of telling you the net price. So if you were to plug in that net price calculator on the different colleges, you're going to see what this slide is showing you. As the schools get less selective, say according to the U.S. News list, the amount of need-based grants is going to go down. That's what this curve is showing. Okay. I'm just looking at the chat. Okay, so Saveta asks about the fit. So the fit is very subjective, but that's where it becomes very hard to kind of know about the fit. You got to really be honest with yourself, and it's tough. It's really tough for a lot of people at that age of 17 to take that. But do the best you can, and this is part of a growth experience. Going to college itself is a huge growth experience, and applying to colleges while you're in high school is also a growth experience. So think of it that way, determining fit. Okay, so need blind versus need aware. Those are two words that are big in financial aid. Remarkably, only 25 schools are need blind. So what does that mean? So those are the lucky 25 if you can get into one of those schools, and that's a factor in applying to schools, because a need blind school will not consider your financial situation at all. So the admissions officers are not aware of your financial need. So whether you need a lot or need nothing should not play a role in whether they admit you or not. Okay. Now, as far as need aware goes, it's not a black and white situation. So need aware, or they call it need sensitive, is a continuum. So schools that are just under the need blind line, they factor it in maybe a little bit. Typically what they'll do is you play early decision. You're in a much better position because the way they think of financial aid is they have a certain pot to give out. and it first come, first served. So if you're early decision, early action, and you get in, they're going to be much more likely to give you, I mean, they're going to give you they're more likely to take you in that sense. They'll give you the money if they're need sensitive because they have the most money at that point. Yeah. Okay, so this is like the slide that is the least fun slide. So the need for financial aid does play a role in admissions for those 95% of the schools that do. This is for, by the way, something very important to say right off the bat. This is only for private colleges. So if you're in state, in New York, we were in New York, so the Sunys and the CUNYs are all need blind. However, you go out of state, like you go to the University of Virginia, University of North Carolina, Cal Berkeley, wherever, then it's different, right? Then they factor in, they will factor in, they could factor in, some don't, some do, but they may factor it in. Many don't, but in state, you just need blind. So these are private colleges we're talking about here. So the point here is that if you have very, very little need, it increases your chances. This is sort of an illustrative slide because, really, it's very hard to pinpoint this number. So this is sort of like very speculative in a way, but it definitely improves your chances, and it's about 20%. And as you can see, it goes down. If you have very high need, it actually raises you because the Pell Grant is a big factor in those rankings and diversity. So if you qualify for a Pell Grant, that's a checkbox. So they really want that. So if you're not middle, like kind of like the lower middle class, maybe, it actually can help you, strangely. But unfortunately, if you're right in the middle, you're not going to get in because most people are in the middle, right? So, but it's not a checkbox for them, and it does hurt you relative to the other ends of the spectrum. And that's not factoring in legacy and things like that, right? So legacy is also legacy, and there are other factors that play a role in admissions. So is it cheaper going to SUNY? This is a very, very common question that comes up, very commonly asked about that. For many families, like if you make $90,000 and you don't have crazy assets, in other words, a typical family making $90,000, it's actually cheaper to go, or about the same price, to go to a selective college, top 50 college, because the private colleges are very generous. Furthermore, even local schools like that are not in the top 50, like St. John's, Hofstra, Delphi, they basically know which schools that you're going to get into, and they know that they're competing against the Sunys. So they give you a merit package that makes it competitive. So this is sort of like the benchmark, what the Sunys charge, because they're all paying attention to it, right? So especially the local schools, like I mentioned, like the St. John's is. So they can't compete with the Ivy Leagues, but they have to compete. They're going to compete with the Sunys and the CUNYs. Okay. So there's a question, of course, you're going to say, how much can I find out how much I'll pay? And the answer is yes. We talked about that. That's called the net price calculator. It's required by federal law to be on any college website. It only takes 10, 15 minutes. Most colleges these days have two versions. One's a quick version, one's more detailed. So if you want to just get a quick number, it might take five or 10 minutes. And then it will tell you the number right off the bat. But here's an example. This is Wesleyan University. And I just want to click on this. This is the homepage. This is Wesleyan just as a typical school that's in the Northeast, right? Every school is pretty much the same. So I'm going to go here and I'm going to write net price calculator. And it says, I click on that, the first hit, and there you go. Give it a cute name, my intuition. And then you can click that, and then you go through the it's quick, it's pretty quick. So you go through there, they ask you basic questions, etc. And you ask you some basic questions about your financial situation. Just give you some basic questions there. Okay, etc. Okay, so there you go. Your total income, market value of your house, and the equity you have in the house. They could ask about your savings and about your investment property. That's about it. That's it. It's done right there. I didn't even fill it out. It gave me $78,000. Okay, that was pretty good. Okay, we're almost done. And this is just like a kind of a cross section. I was saying before how it varies so much, but this is just, I did this for $90,000 in income. You could see the huge, this is net price. So this is after the need-based grants only. You can see the huge range. I mean, incredible. The University of Michigan, by the way, that's in-state. We're talking about in-state students there. Not out of state. Out of state, actually, Michigan does not give good fit. Most, by the way, most out of state schools that are very desirable, like North Carolina and Virginia, they're very popular schools. If you're out of state, the aid is really bad. So if you need aid, that's something to think about. But you can see the range here, and you can see the correlation, right? So that's useful to know, and that is that's in the list. That's the college scorecard. And that we said that before. Oh, so we're going to be putting on Francis a admissions workshop. So we're thinking about doing it in 5 sessions. Strategies in choosing the college list. More details about doing that. How do you do it? Getting into the weeds a little bit with that. The advantages of it. How to gain the biggest advantage in admissions. So this is sort of like insights from the admissions officer perspective, like how to leverage the application. For example, I mentioned about the spike and emphasizing things like one quick tip about the Common App. Like you want to put like 2 activities. Like for example, if you are on say that you are the soccer team in high school and you are on a club team and you weren't going to include it because it's just a club soccer team. No, you want to put it in there because it shows, that's like an example of showing a more directed interest, that this is something you have a lot of passion about, and you're doing it beyond one single activity. And then we talk about the financial aid maze. So this workshop will actually be filling out applications. So we're going to be filling out applications and walking you through the process and filling out the financial aid forms, which can be daunting. And then how to think about college as far as career, like you want to think a step ahead, like a chess game. So how does career and college and major, what kind of role do they play? How do you discover interests? I mean, 17-year-old, how would they know? Well, there are ways of doing that, thinking about it and keeping an open mind, et cetera. So that's all something that will happen as a workshop. We'll send that out. Francis will send out information about signing up for that. And any questions? Do you have any questions, Francis?
Everyone, let's give Bill a gigantic, colossal thank you for this wealth of information, an hour of 20 minutes. Hello, let's thank my 2 fingers for typing for the past hour and 20 minutes. I just really want to say thank you, Bill, so much. I really sincerely mean that. Everyone listening, and I really want to just share that it's incredible that you offer this service. And it's also that you are available for private counseling, and at Queller Prep, we have an amazing team of counselors as well. So please, everyone, thank you so much. If you're able to go online and post a nice review, I just want you to know I read them. And I read them when they're bad too, and I respond. But hopefully when they're great, I want to let you know, thank you so much for this amazing webinar and this amazing wealth of information. I also just really want to share that, like, knowing you at Townsend Harris, and I never really got to say this because I was always like with my table and my highlighters and my markers, advertising. I never really got to say how much I enjoyed your webinars. And they were just so sincere and they were just so to the point. And I'm really impressed with all the data and the metrics. And I can only imagine how long it took you to put all these charts together. It was just really enlightening for me. So I absolutely want to say thank you. And as you guys are, just winding down, what else? Just to share with you that this is really something that Bill is just a very sincere, he's really just an amazing person. And I enjoy the energy. I enjoy connecting with amazing people such as yourself. If anyone, Bill, if you have any closing remarks or advice that you want to provide to the students, please do that. I want to remind everyone, please. Oh, that's my Goldie. Guys, we're going to, we'll do a doggy moment. We'll close up on a nice, happy note. Let's do 2 things. Let's give Bill a huge thank you. So everyone, let's take one moment. I'm going to take everyone off mute. So there are 168 people. So I'm about to take off. That's my dog. I'm about to take everybody off mute. We're all going to say thank you to Bill. Are you ready, guys? Hold on a second. Give me a minute to figure this out. Okay, here's the chat. Give me a second. Please bear with me. Okay, ready? I'm gonna ask everyone to unmute. Everybody say thank you, Bill.
Thank
Thank you,
you.
Bill.
Very much.
Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you, Bill.
Thank
Everyone.
you, Bill. Thank you, Francis.
Thank you. Very informative.
Thank you, Bill.
Bill.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Excellent.
Thank
Wow.
you.
Everyone say thank you, Bill. Thank
Thank
you so
you.
much.
Thank you, Bill.
Thank you,
And
Bill. And thank you,
Thank you,
Francis.
Bill.
yay, I'm so happy. Bill, thank you so much for this huge wealth of information. And please type thank you in the chat box.
I video it. What do you have it covered up?
Thank you. Thank you.
No,
Thank
no.
you, Bill. This was a wonderful webinar.
Thank you. I hope it was helpful, and I actually get a lot of satisfaction from working with parents and students on this stuff. So
Yes,
it's a pleasure.
absolutely. And everyone, please remember, knowledge is power. And as a reminder to all of you, myself as a child of immigrants, I had no bill. And I really have to tell you, 20 years ago, it was sad. I had no bill. I had no access to a bill. You actually did not exist in my life. So I really had to learn the hard way. And it wasn't until after I got into NYU and after I attended NYU and I was a student for a year that I started learning what I should have, could have, and would have done differently. So I can't even tell you how upsetting it was. So thank you, Bill. Thank you so much for sharing your wealth of information. Let's do one final thank you and we're going out. Okay, everyone, ready? Say thank you. Thank you, thank you, thank you.
Thank
Thank
Let's do a
you.
thumbs up.
Thank
Thumbs
you.
up, Bill. Thumbs up and applause.
Thank
Yay.
you.
Thank
Thank you so much.
Have a great summer.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you.
Thank
Thank
you.
Bill.
And
Thank
thank
you,
you,
everyone.
Francis.
You're welcome, guys. Thank you to my two fingers for typing. That was a lot.
Yeah.
All right. Thank you. Thank you, guys. Okay. Take care. Bye, everybody.
Bye,
Bye,
guys.
bye.
Bye.
Good night.
Bye-bye, Francis.
Thank you. Bye, everybody. Thank
Bye,
you.
everyone. Thank you.
Bill.